The median motorcycle owner in America is now 50 years old. Yeah, 50. Back in the mid-1980s, that typical owner was about 27. In a single generation, it nearly doubled, and the number of riders under 30 has been quietly falling off a cliff. The easy explanation is the one you have heard 100 times. Young people are lazy, they are soft, they are too glued to their phones to twist a throttle. But when you actually follow the money, a very different story shows up. Young people did not fall out of love with motorcycles. They got priced out, taxed out, and regulated out of the one thing that was supposed to feel like pure freedom. This is why nobody under 30 rides anymore. Let us start with just how dramatic this shift really is, because the numbers are honestly staggering. The Motorcycle Industry Council has been surveying American riders for decades, and their data tells a brutal story. In 1990, the median age of a motorcycle owner was 32. By 2009, it had climbed to 40, and by 2018, the last time they ran the full owner survey, it hit 50. That is a rider base getting almost a full year older with every year that passes, which is basically a demographic treadmill that nobody can climb off of. And here is the detail that should genuinely scare anyone who loves bikes. Back in 1990, riders under 18 made up about 8% of all owners. In recent surveys, that number cratered to around 2%. Picture a packed motorcycle rally in a field full of chrome and leather and rumbling engines, and then imagine that same crowd getting a little grayer every single summer, with fewer and fewer young faces showing up to take their place. And the folks who are still riding, they are doing pretty well for themselves. That same industry survey put the median household income of a motorcycle owner at around $62,000 and climbing. Riding, which used to be the affordable, slightly rebellious way for a broke young person to get on the road, has quietly morphed into a comfortable hobby for the financially established. The rebels grew up, kept their bikes, and nobody young enough could afford to fill the empty spots behind them. The pipeline of new riders is not just shrinking. In a lot of places, it is drying up completely. An entire industry is slowly rolling toward a cliff, and the engine noise is getting quieter every year. So naturally, the motorcycle world went looking for someone to blame, and they landed on the easiest target imaginable: the kids. You've heard the grumbling at every dealership counter and in every YouTube comment section. This generation is soft. They'd rather scroll on a screen than lean into a corner. They don't have the guts, they don't have the grit, they just don't get it. And look, it's a very comforting story if you're an older rider, because it means the problem is those darn kids, and nothing about the sport itself needs to change. There's just one issue. That story falls apart the second you look at the actual receipts, because when you sit down and add up what it now costs a 22-year-old to legally throw a leg over a motorcycle and ride off into the sunset, you start to understand something a lot less flattering to the sport than a story about soft kids. It all comes down to a bill that got bigger and bigger and bigger, until an entire generation quietly could not afford to say yes. So let's actually add up that bill, and we'll start with the machine itself. New motorcycles have gotten a lot more expensive since 2020, and not by a little. Once you pile on freight charges, dealer fees, financing, and insurance, the real out-the-door price has jumped hard in just a few years. And look at the top of the range for a gut check. Walk into a Harley-Davidson showroom, and the fully loaded touring and custom models can sail right past $40,000 once you add the markups, the accessories, and the fees. 40 grand for a motorcycle. Now, that's not the bike a beginner buys. Nobody's handing a nervous 19-year-old a $40,000 tourer. But it sets the ceiling, and the whole market has drifted upward underneath it. Even the sensible middleweight bikes that a young rider might actually want have crept steadily out of reach, pushed along by inflation, supply chain chaos, and manufacturers who quietly figured out that fat margins on expensive machines beat thin margins on cheap ones. And remember, that sticker price is really just the down payment on the true cost of riding. Because as our young rider is about to discover, the bike is the cheap part. Next comes the insurance, and this is where the whole system really twists the knife. Insurance companies price risk by age, and they have collectively decided that young riders are walking liabilities on two wheels. Look at what that actually means in dollars. Data compiled by Statista from Progressive Quotes shows a 16-year-old on a cruiser paying around $340 every single month, while a 50-year-old on the exact same bike pays about $190. Same machine, same road, nearly double the premium purely because of the number on your birth certificate. And now, for the cruel little trap hidden inside the trap, the bikes young people can actually afford, the used sport bikes with a bit of speed and a bit of attitude, are the exact machines that insurers punish the hardest. Sport bikes cost 2.5 to 3.5 times more to insure than a comparable cruiser. So a broke 20-year-old shopping for the cheapest fast starter bike they can find walks straight into the single most expensive insurance profile in the entire market. Young rider, cheap bike, high horsepower. It's the perfect storm of premiums, and it lands squarely on the shoulders of the people who can least afford to carry it. Push that scenario into an expensive state, and it gets almost cartoonish. Industry rate data shows a young rider on a full coverage sport bike in a high-cost state like California can be quoted $3,000 a year or more just for insurance. That's a used car's worth of premiums every single year before you've bought a drop of gas. But let's say our young rider grits their teeth and swallows both the bike payment and that insurance quote. They still can't legally or safely ride yet because now they need to gear up and get trained. A proper helmet, the kind that keeps your skull from becoming a science experiment, runs a few $100s all on its own. Then add a real armored jacket, a set of gloves, some boots, maybe a pair of riding pants, and you're easily looking at another several hundred to well over $1,000 before you've moved a single inch down the road. Then there's the training course. In the United States, the Motorcycle Safety Foundation's basic rider course is the standard on-ramp for beginners, and depending on where you live, it can run anywhere from around $100 to over $350. Now stack it all together: the bike, the insurance, the gear, the license, the training. For a first-year rider, financing the machine and adding everything on top, the true cost of entry can climb well past $10,000, 10 grand just to start a hobby. For a generation already drowning in bills, that isn't an on-ramp to riding, that's a brick wall. And speaking of walls, let's talk about the paperwork, because the road to a license got a whole lot longer too. In the United States, young people are simply getting licensed later for absolutely everything. Federal Highway Administration data shows the share of teenagers holding a driver's license has fallen dramatically since the 1980s. And if you're not even bothering to drive a car at 17, you are definitely not sprinting down to the DM5 for a motorcycle endorsement. But if you really want to watch licensing get turned into a full-blown obstacle course, look across the Atlantic. In the United Kingdom and much of Europe, you can't just walk in, pass one test, and ride whatever you want. There's a tiered system that reads like a video game skill tree. You start with a compulsory basic training session, then a theory test, then a practical test for an A1 license on a small bike. And if you ever want to legally ride something bigger, you have to climb up through the A2 category and eventually the full A license, often waiting years and retaking tests as you go. In a lot of places, you can't even get direct access to the most powerful bikes until you're 24 years old. So a 19-year-old who just wants a proper motorcycle is told to either buy a deliberately weakened machine or come back in half a decade. Meanwhile, the whole idea of getting your license the day you turn old enough has faded for this generation anyway. Fewer young people are bothering to drive at all, let alone chase down a second, harder, more expensive license just to ride something the law treats as a death trap. By the time you total up the courses, the test fees, and the mandatory gear, getting fully licensed in the UK can climb past £1,000, depending on how many lessons you need, and it can stretch across several birthdays. The message a young person receives is loud and unmistakable. Riding a motorcycle is now a bureaucratic marathon, and somebody keeps moving the finish line. Now stack every one of those costs on top of the single factor that ties them all together, and it's the part the blame the kids crowd always conveniently forgets. Young people simply have far less money to throw at any of it. This is a generation that walked into adulthood carrying record student loan debt, facing rents that devour a monster chunk of every paycheck, and staring at home prices that make their parents' first mortgage look like a rounding error. Study after study has found that today's young adults have built up less wealth than the baby boomers had at the very same age, even as wages struggle to keep pace with the relentlessly rising cost of living. So when a motorcycle stops being a couple $1,000s of weekend fun and turns into a 5-figure commitment with punishing insurance bolted on, it doesn't just slide down the priority list. It falls off the list entirely, somewhere below rent, groceries, and the faint hope of one day being able to retire. If you're finding this breakdown useful, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button. I dig into the real forces reshaping motorcycle culture and the industry every single week, and it genuinely helps the channel keep growing. Now let's talk about where all these young, almost riders actually went, because a whole lot of them went to the city, and the modern city is not exactly rolling out the red carpet for a broke 20-something on 2 wheels. More young people than ever are packed into dense urban apartments where there is nowhere safe to park a motorcycle, let alone a garage to wrench on one in. And the moment you're living downtown, that motorcycle suddenly faces a mountain of competition it never used to deal with. Need to get across town at midnight? There's a rideshare app glowing right there on your phone. Want something cheap and fun for a quick trip? Electric scooters and rental e-bikes are parked on practically every street corner now. No license and no insurance required. Just trying to get to work in the rain? A used car with a roof and a heater or a subway seat starts looking awfully sensible. A motorcycle used to be one of the cheapest ways on earth for a young person to get mobile and taste a little freedom. But in a modern city stuffed with apps, scooters, and transit, it has quietly become one of the most expensive and least practical options on the entire board. The Freedom Machine got out-competed by a scooter you unlock with your thumb. Then there's the small matter of danger. And even if a young person genuinely wanted to ride, the risk math has gotten a lot harder to wave away. The federal crash data is genuinely sobering. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, motorcyclists are close to 28 times more likely to die in a crash per mile traveled than people riding inside cars. 28 times. That is not a number you can just shrug off with a cool attitude. For a generation raised to be hyper-aware of safety, and for the parents who might once have chipped in for that first bike, a number like that is a serious gut check. Plenty of parents who happily helped buy their kid a used car will flatly refuse to put a single dollar toward a motorcycle, and that quietly knocks out a funding source that used to put a lot of teenagers on 2 wheels in the first place. So the young rider is left standing there, staring at a machine that costs a small fortune, punishes them on insurance, takes months and paperwork to get licensed for, and carries a genuinely frightening safety record. and they're expected to sign up for every bit of it completely alone. But if you want to find the real villain lurking in this story, don't look at the young riders at all. Look at the industry that spent decades quietly building itself around their absence. For years, the biggest names in motorcycling made a very deliberate business decision. They chased the wealthy, aging customer with the fat wallet and the paid-off house, and they largely ignored the broke beginner. And nobody embodies this better than Harley-Davidson. Rewind to 1987, and Reuters reported that half of all Harley riders were under 35. Fast forward to today, and the brand leans heavily on older, wealthier buyers and big, high-margin touring machines. Harley itself has said its typical financing customer is somewhere around 45, and its beating heart is still the graying, fiercely loyal boomer who's been buying the brand for decades. And it gets worse for the beginner. Harley actually discontinued some of its most affordable entry-level bikes, dropping the Little Street 500 and 750 after 2020, and shoving new and smaller riders toward the used market or out the door entirely. Meanwhile, the company kept cranking out heavier, pricier, chrome-drenched machines aimed at that same loyal core, cashing those fat margins while the next generation quietly drifted toward lighter, cheaper, more modern bikes from Honda, Kawasaki, and Royal Enfield. Harley optimized its entire business around the customer who was slowly aging out of the saddle, and it treated the young first-time rider like an afterthought. It was fantastic short-term math. It was also slow-motion suicide. Across 2025, Harley's North American retail sales fell about 13%, with global retail sales down around 12%. Eventually, the industry noticed the gaping hole where young riders used to be, and Harley decided to finally do something about it. Their big swing at the next generation was the Livewire, a sleek electric motorcycle designed to win over young, urban, tech-savvy riders. And it was a genuinely interesting machine. There was just one tiny problem. They bolted a price tag onto it that no cash-strapped 25-year-old on the planet could touch. The original Livewire launched at nearly $30,000, 30 grand, for a first electric motorcycle supposedly aimed at winning over young riders. And here's the part that makes it almost tragic. The interest was genuinely there. That same Motorcycle Industry Council survey found that nearly 70% of millennial owners said they were interested in electric motorcycles. Young riders were practically raising their hands and asking for exactly this. So the industry built the electric bike they wanted and then slapped a price on it that only a middle-aged executive could love. Just sit with that logic for a second. Young people can't afford your gas bikes, so the master plan is to sell them a more expensive electric one. Predictably, it flopped. It flopped so hard that Harley eventually spun Livewire off into its own brand and slashed the prices, and today, those same bikes have come down to roughly $10,000 and $16,000, which basically confirms how wildly overpriced they were to begin with. Even so, the division has kept hemorrhaging money, reporting an operating loss of around $75 million in 2025. It was a perfect little snapshot of an industry that had spent so many years ignoring young riders that when it finally tried to court them, it fundamentally did not understand what they actually needed. The answer was never a fancier, pricier toy. The answer was something they could actually afford. And that brings us to the single piece of evidence that blows the whole lazy kids theory to smithereens. Because when a motorcycle is affordable, genuinely stylish, and actually built with a younger rider in mind, young people buy it in absolute droves. Just look at what's been happening while the legacy giants aged out. Brands like Royal Enfield, the classic Indian mark, exploded in popularity by doing the one thing the old guard forgot how to do: building good-looking, retro-styled, mid-sized motorcycles that a normal human being can actually afford. Their 650cc twins landed as fresh, contemporary, genuinely cool bikes at a fraction of the price of a big, flashy cruiser, and younger riders flocked straight to them. Across the whole market, the fastest-growing corner of motorcycling is affordable, lightweight, mid-displacement machines from makers like Honda, Kawasaki, KTM, and Royal Enfield. The used bike market is booming for the very same reason. And here's another crack in the old story. Women, long treated as an afterthought by the industry, now make up nearly 1 in 5 motorcycle owners, and an even bigger share among younger riders. The demand was sitting right there, in plain sight, the entire time. Give a 25-year-old a cool bike they can afford to buy, insure, and park, and they will absolutely take it. The desire to ride never died. The industry just spent years flatly refusing to build for it. So where does all of this leave us right now? Well, slowly and a little painfully, the industry is finally starting to wake up. Harley has been rolling out smaller, cheaper models like the X350 and the X440 in overseas markets, pretty transparently hoping to hook younger and first-time riders with a lower price of entry. Manufacturers across the board are finally talking about affordability and beginner-friendly bikes like it's an actual strategy instead of a rounding error. And that booming used market is quietly doing a ton of the heavy lifting, putting cash-strapped young riders onto older bikes that the shiny new bike showrooms had already priced them out of. But the hole that decades of neglect dug is deep, and it is not going to fill back in overnight. The median rider keeps getting older, the core boomer customer base is literally aging out of the saddle, and the clock is ticking louder with every passing season. The industry is now in a genuine high-stakes race against its own demographics. And it's the exact same industry that spent 30 years making riding unaffordable for the precise people it now desperately needs to survive. Funny how that works. So the next time someone tells you that young people just don't ride anymore because they're lazy or soft or hopelessly addicted to their screens, you'll know the real answer is a whole lot more uncomfortable than that. It's not that a generation lost its nerve. It's that riding got quietly priced out of their reach. One insurance quote, one licensing fee, and one $40,000 showroom sticker at a time. The love of the open road, the rumble of the engine, the pull of the horizon, none of that ever went anywhere. The math just stopped adding up. And until the machines, the premiums, and the paperwork finally come back down to earth, that 50-year-old average is only heading in one direction. If this changed the way you look at that empty seat where the next generation of riders should be, hit subscribe and stick around. Because the story of who gets to ride and who gets left standing on the curb is really only getting started.